Hello and welcome to the sixth KV421 Podcast of the year. And for this final podcast, I'm going to be talking about the idea of professional formation, and in particular how that relates to this first year of the degree programme that you're on, and how this particularly kind of helps you develop a sense of your own unique identity as a professional practitioner. So hopefully by now you've picked up that one of the things that we're very keen on supporting you developing is that unique sense of yourself as a practitioner and as a professional. A sense that you bring to your professional role a range of experiences, a range of identities, and often managing a range of competing needs and contrasting relationships. So in a sense, all the time as a practitioner, our sense is, and certainly our own experience is, that we juggle. We juggle competing needs, we juggle competing roles, and continually we're having to make adjustments and judgments about our practice in the moment. So it's not straightforward. It's not straightforward, and in a sense that's one of the defining features of what we mean by professional, that we're able to manage that range of competing needs and competing issues within our work, and continue to make judgments and continue to engage with those we work with in a meaningful, responsive, professional way. But for this podcast, I want to focus on three particular dimensions that I think that we bring to our work, and in fact how we manage those together, and how those three dimensions, in a sense, inform who we are professionally. And as I'm going to be talking for the next 10 minutes, you might think about how these three elements also might inform the summative commentary, the 2,000 word summative commentary that you have to write for this KV421 assignment. And alongside this podcast there is also a PowerPoint presentation which presents some of the ideas that I'm going to be talking about in a slightly different format, so you might want to watch this podcast as well as look at the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so the first of those three dimensions I want to talk about is what we might call our personal self. And by our personal self, I mean the range of experiences, roles that we've had in the past perhaps, people that we've known that have influenced us, values that we bring to our work as a practitioner in working with children and young people. And maybe a way of thinking about this is that we bring with us a kind of a box of goodies, and that box of goodies is all the things that are important to us in terms of our lives, about how we manage perhaps other roles outside of our work, and motivations for doing the work that we do. So just as an example, I can remember when I was at school, at secondary school, I had a drama teacher called Dave Burrows, and Dave was just tremendous. I thought he was a bit of a maverick. He was a bit like, a bit slightly dangerous, if I'm honest. When I used to go into his drama studio for lessons, we never quite knew what was going to happen. But he was also somebody who fundamentally believed in young people and believed that they had the capacity to be wonderful. And he managed to communicate that to us in his teaching, and for me particularly, in the way that he, over a number of years at school, kind of was acting as my mentor. And it was Dave that, I guess, helped me think about where I might go in terms of my working life, and it perhaps inspired me to work with young people. In a sense, I wanted to give to other young people what Dave gave to me. So we bring, as I was saying, we bring to our professional roles, to our professional identities, a whole bunch of personal experiences, personal values, personal landmarks, if you like, in terms of what makes us who we are. And it's really important that we are aware of those, but also that we think about how those inform us and shape our professional selves. So that first notion first dimension we're talking about is our personal self. And over the course of this first year in the course, if things may have happened in your personal lives which have then impacted on your role as a practitioner and your role as a professional. The second dimension I'd like you to think about then is your academic self. as a student at university, you are engaged in a process. It's a long process, 4 years, and it's a process which we know is incredibly challenging. One of the features of being a student is that you are assessed, that you're judged. You present work to us and we mark it. You engage in groups and in seminars, and you engage with other people, and very consciously part of the process of achieving a degree is being assessed and judged in that process. And that's quite a difficult process to engage with, particularly initially. I hope that it becomes easier over time, but in a sense it's quite unlike most other parts of our life where we're not perhaps as consciously judged or overtly judged with specific feedback. And that process of engaging in assessed work and demonstrating learning through that process and opening that learning up to questioning by others is a really important part of becoming professional and that professional formation process. And that's why, in a sense, coming to university is such an important part of becoming a professional. It places you in a position where you are open to question and you are open to questioning others as well. And that process of giving and receiving feedback is a really important part of the process. And hopefully you've got to start to get a bit of a sense of that, particularly through the reflective practice group sessions where you circulate recordings and you engage critically with each other in terms of the focus of your work and the focus of your recordings. So that aspect of an academic self is also an important part of the professional formation process. Some of you will find that process easier, more easy than others, but for each of you that process of engaging in the academic journey is a really important part of the process of becoming a professional. And then of course the final third element of the process is your practice, is the everyday nature of engaging with children and young people in the workplace, is the use of the developing skills and knowledge and the application of those in different situations. And perhaps that's where your learning contracts most clearly come into play within this module, where you commit yourself to look at particular aspects of your practice and hopefully find opportunities to stretch your practice, to take on new challenges, and in the process reflect on how those challenges have developed your practice further. So that notion of professional practice as being a really important part of the professional formation process. So those three elements then: the personal self, what is it I bring to my work, what is it I bring in terms of previous experiences, knowledge, understanding, values, previous relationships. The academic self, you as a student, that process of engaging in study consciously, giving, receiving feedback, being assessed and so on. And then the professional practice element, actually undertaking the work with children and young people, but doing that in a conscious way and a way which you are in a sense setting yourself particular targets to develop further. And it's those three elements that we're particularly keen on you exploring when we talk about professional formation. Perhaps those three elements will inform your 2,000 word commentary. So a little bit more about that 2,000 word commentary. We believe very strongly that part of this particular module and the course as a whole helps you develop what we call your professional narrative. And your professional narrative fundamentally is the way that you talk about and explain and engage with the process of being professional. It's the stories that we tell about ourselves. It's the way we engage with each other in the work. Perhaps it's the very short, brief conversations between sessions or on the way home. Perhaps it's the more lengthy conversations that you might have with people about particular challenges. Perhaps it's when people ask you what you do. I also remember my mum never quite getting the hang of what it was I did, particularly when I was sometimes working within school and other times working as a therapist and other times working as a youth worker. And she would continually ask me, so what is it you do exactly? And I would have to continually try and explain to her with examples of what it is that I did. But actually one of the things that was quite useful for me was that it did really challenge me to think about, so what is it that I do? How do I describe the focus of my work? What is it important in terms of how I work and what I do for a living? And developing that personal, professional narrative is really important for us. It gives us a way of connecting back from where we've come from, so previous work. In my case, connecting back to working in a bookshop, connecting back to being a play worker, connecting back to being a physics teacher, connecting back to working in a museum, all those previous things we've done. But bringing those aspects of ourselves into the present, into how we're working now, and also helping us think about where we might go next in terms of development. I'm guessing that if you take a look at your practice now compared with how it was a year ago, 2 years ago, things may have changed for you. They may have changed very clearly in terms of the job that you do, but also more subtly within that job. And developing our professional narrative helps us to manage that process and actually enter that process more consciously. Perhaps you might think of the recordings that we ask you to do as a way of taking snapshots of your own individual professional narrative. Perhaps me doing these recordings every month or so is a way of me bringing in aspects of my professional narrative and sharing those with you. So as we go forward, coming to the end of this year and moving on into next year, perhaps more consciously think about your own professional narrative and how that is shaping, and how it is shaping and informing your practice, and how your practice is shaping and informing that narrative. And the final thing I just want to kind of flag up before we, in a sense, bring this first year of the course to a close and move on to the second year. Next year you will continue with these reflective practice groups. But one of the things that we will kind of turn the volume up slightly is that notion of your sense of connectedness to a professional community. Certainly being on the course gives you the opportunity to engage in that community, you're engaging with other practitioners. But as we move on into the course even further, we'll start to explore how that community extends beyond our own immediate environment, and how we have a sense of connectedness to other related professionals as well. So I hope, as always, this podcast has been interesting and helpful. Think of it as a way of reflecting back over the year and connecting with some of the key elements that you might write about in your 2,000 word extended summative piece. On Student Central, I've posted some other documents which hopefully will be useful. As I mentioned, there's a PowerPoint. There's also an assessment checklist, and I'll ask you to, in a sense, download that and include that in your portfolio of recordings and other documentation which you hand in for assessment in May this year. Okay, thanks so much for your attention, and I hope to see you soon.